With a population of 8 million people who speak 800 different languages, New York City is as diverse as it gets. Empire City, the city of dreams, the city that never sleeps. No other in the world has been given as many nicknames as NYC. It's a city for dreamers, a place that welcomes everyone with open arms as they try to find a place for themselves. But how did the Big Apple become what it is today? In this video, we're giving you a roundup of New York's transformation and its future to show you just how special this city really is. The story of NYC starts way back in the 1620s, when the Dutch bought what was then known as the island of Manhattan from the natives, and then started to build a small town on its southern tip. This small town was called New Amsterdam, and because of its proximity to the water, the city relied on selling otter, beaver, mink, and seal skins. But because New Amsterdam was a small place with limited land, the small population that went up to just 1,500 inhabitants back then started cultivating lands in the surrounding areas of Manhattan and Brooklyn. Slowly, people started to arrive and settle around New Amsterdam in areas that came to be known as Harlem, Staten Island, and the Bronx. And while early settlers were mostly Dutch, it was in 1664 when the first group of English settlers arrived in the area, conquered it from the Dutch, and renamed it New York in honor of the Duke of York. And that's when the fate of the city started shifting. By the 17th century, New York was home to about 5,000 people, and the number was only increasing with time. For the next century, the population of the city grew larger and more diverse. It included immigrants from the Netherlands, England, France, and Germany, indentured servants, and African slaves. This time around, the city made most of its money through milling. The grain was ground into flour by windmills. Meanwhile, the New York merchants also traded with Britain and the West Indies. There was also a shipbuilding industry in New York in the 18th century, and the first shipyard began operations in 1720, opening New York up to whole new parts of the world. At the same time, New York was also a prominent center for anti-British activities when an army of 13 colonies tried to gain back control of the city and all the areas it encompassed. This led to the Revolutionary War, where eventually the city was taken over by the British. However, NYC recovered from the war in no time and continued its journey towards modernization. The first newspaper, the New York Gazette, began publication in 1725. The first theater in New York opened in 1732. King's College, now Columbia University, was founded in 1754. So it's safe to say that NYC was definitely on the right track. By 1810, New York had become one of America's most important ports and played a huge role in the cotton economy by allowing southern planters to ship their crops to English industrial cities and textile manufacturers there to ship their finished goods back to New York. In 1978, the world saw New York become the force that it is today. This was the year when the Bank of New York was founded. Prior to 1792, trading in stocks and shares took place informally in and around Wall Street. However, in that year, a group of merchants signed an agreement to only deal with each other. That was the beginning of the New York Stock Exchange and the start of a total shift for the city. More and more people started making their way towards New York, which is why in 1811, the government decided to completely revamp the city in terms of infrastructure to improve its overall livability. That same year, the commissioner's plan established an orderly grid of streets and avenues for the underdeveloped parts of Manhattan, north of Houston Street. In 1837, construction on the Corton Aqueduct began, which provided clean water for the city's growing population. 8 years after that, the city established its first municipal agency, the New York City Police Department. As the city grew safer, the American population started viewing it as a land of new opportunities and beginnings. By 1820, New York had become the USA's largest city with a population of 123,000, and by 1840, it had grown to more than double that. By 1860, New York had a total of 813,000 inhabitants, settling in all kinds of neighborhoods, starting businesses, building churches, social clubs, and engaging in politics and activism, all the traits of a flourishing city. Around the 1880s, tons of exciting historical events took place, including the creation of the Washington Square Park, the opening of Brooklyn Bridge, and of course, the installation of telephones all over the metropolis. With the 19th century, New York was reshaped into what we know it as today. In 1895, residents of Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island, and Brooklyn, all independent cities at the time, voted to consolidate with Manhattan to form a 5-borough Greater New York. As a result, on December 31, 1897, New York City had an area of 60 square miles and a population of little more than 2 million people. On January 1st, 1898, when the consolidation plan took effect, New York City had an area of 360 square miles and a population of about 3,350,000 people. At the end of the 19th century, garment trade in the city was booming, and tons of historic structures in sites such as the Statue of Liberty, New York Public Library, Times Square, and Grand Central Station were inaugurated. By the start of the 20th century, the city had become a financial and cultural hub. And because so many immigrants were practically pouring into NYC, the city also did not have to bear the brunt of the economic aftermath of World War II and continued to grow at a constant speed throughout the 1900s. However, things took a turn for the worst in 2001, when the world witnessed the deadliest terrorist attack in modern history, the tragedy of 9/11. The incident not only destroyed New York's iconic World Trade Center, but it also killed over 3,000 people, a loss that many still haven't recovered from. In the wake of this crisis, New York still remained the country's financial capital, and with strengthened security measures, the city opened itself up for tourists. Over 40 million people visit New York every year to take a sneak peek into the life of the Big Apple. Today, New York still holds the reputation of being one of the most vibrant and culturally diverse cities in the world, with plenty of sights to see and opportunities to grow. The city has thrived ever since it appeared on the map, and as far as the future goes, people believe that the loss the city experienced as a result of the deadly COVID-19 pandemic is only temporary. After all, history has shown that New York always bounces back. As the city slowly reopens, people are expecting to go back into the 70s vibe and regain its reputation as a party destination with clubs, bars, and concerts, giving a major boost to the Big Apple's economy and tourism. In fact, the city might also get its very first casino. Apart from that, NYC is planning to expand affordable high-speed internet and 5G technology and ramp up its solar capacity. Transportation is undergoing a tech makeover, with shared electric mopeds and scooters, Tesla-only ride-hailing apps, electric school buses, and more electric vehicle charging stations, which all means that New York is definitely ready to move into the digital future once things go back to normal. The city government has also contacted people to set in motion plans to provide free Wi-Fi to homeless shelters and public housing, which will help the urban metropolis further transition into a digital hub, not just a financial one. Regardless of what the future holds, New York will always be a city that thrives on its fast-paced lifestyle. The city's constantly expanding prominence on a global scale, combined with the kind of history it holds in every street, make it a place of magnificence like no other. That's a wrap on New York's transformation and its future. If you liked this video and want to see more, make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. See you next time!